So I was taking a casual stroll through Steam. There are plenty of roguelikes that I already own that I could make a video about, but what's the fun in not spending any more money, am I right? And I didn't have to search long. A game dropped that day that grabbed my attention a bit. Wallworld. Checking out the store page, the premise was different. It's a world that's entirely a vertical wall. You take your giant metal spider and attempt to climb up to the top, and that's it. Very simple, but very intriguing. This strange yet promising sounding concept, along with the fact that it was only $5, was more than enough reason for me to pick it up. Looking over the reviews, which currently stand at mostly positive, a good handful of people were comparing it to a game called Dome Keeper, a game I have not heard of, but looking at the store page, there are some undeniable similarities between the two, but that's nothing uncommon in the gaming market, and also nothing bad as long as the game is good. And there seem to be some ways that it appears to differentiate itself, so that's good enough for me. But if I'm going to be completely honest, Wallworld is a game that has quite a hefty amount of potential, but is also incredibly disappointing at the same time. It is so close to being good. But there's one slight oversight that really makes it falter for me. That being said, I do enjoy the game, but that's almost worse. Since I have had a good time with it, the problem just becomes that much more disappointing to me. I'll get back to this point later. First, let me tell you a little bit about it. So let's get into the gameplay. Wallworld has two main components to its loop. You crawl up the wall until you find entrance to a mine, you bust it and blast through some rocks, and you collect minerals along the way. Minerals are the resources that you use to upgrade yourself and the spider and other items that you might find. You'll quickly find that the vacuum backpack is quite small, so the best way to get resources is to mine until the spider is about to get attacked, which is indicated by a bar to the lower left that shows you when a new wave is going to attack you. You suck up all the minerals right next to you, then you use the vacuum to continuously pull all the other things you mined with you to the ship. From my experience, there's no guaranteed way to get them to all stay together as you move. I just kind of wiggle my mouse at a rock when it starts to fall away from the others. But learning this early is massive because filling up your backpack and dropping it off constantly is incredibly ineffective as well as slow. The upgrade system to it isn't all that complicated. You pick one of the top ones, and as you purchase it, another one or two upgrades are opened up under it. Most of them are passive upgrades, make the gun do more damage per shot or rotate around the spider faster, move quicker in the mines and have better drilling efficiency, things of this nature. Some are a bit more inventive though. You are eventually able to split the drill into into 2 or 3 beams, making you able to hit more blocks at once while you dig. Other weapons tend to have more interesting upgrades as well, with the bomb thrower being able to add shrapnel to follow after the initial explosion. This leads to the next part of the game, the combat. It is very basic, especially at the beginning of the game. At the start, all you have is the default gun and the ability to move the spider up and down. That is literally it. It gets expanded on pretty quickly, as one of the earliest permanent upgrades you can unlock is a missile that's on a cooldown, but it helps deal with problem stronger enemies that you might not be prepared for in the early game. So it's very useful for the first 15 or so minutes of the run. You're also able to get an upward thrust and then a downward repel early as well. This gives your spider some much needed mobility. Not only useful for dodging things like the boss's attacks, but it's also useful for hopping over enemies that are body blocking you and you're trying to maneuver around. As the name implies, after you purchase a permanent upgrade, you'll possess them throughout every run you do. These also provide passive effects like more health and more movement speed for the spider, which is incredibly important. The speed is almost a necessity, as it not only lets you, get to caves faster, so you're spending less time climbing the wall, but you also gain the ability to outrun enemies and potentially even their projectiles, giving you a little bit of an ability to dodge. The natural progression for the game is something I also enjoy. You're so weak at the start of the game that it is literally impossible for you to win the run on the first run. You'll need to get more permanent upgrades before you're able to likely even get past the first boss. This could be a bit of a divisive point for people, because it's almost akin to a boss fight in a game that you are scripted to lose. The problem is that instead of doing a couple minute fight and then dying and having the game progress naturally after that because you were supposed to lose, this part can take a few hours before you really get past it. In that sense, it's quite restrictive, and it's understandable if certain people don't love that idea. For me, though, I like it, mainly because you're given the chance to get a lot of permanent upgrades pretty quick. So if you have a really good run and get a lot of the currency to buy permanent upgrades, you can feel yourself becoming way more powerful than you were even the previous run that you just did. It's also cool because it gives you a strong sense of, I'm really making progress in this game. So while I'm a fan, if that concept isn't for you, then that isn't for you, and I totally understand that. These upgrades are nice and help a lot in the combat, but there's one thing about this game that really drags it down for me. going back to the big problem that I was talking about earlier in the beginning of the video. And the reason I feel that way about it is solely because of the RNG in the game. And when you're mining, there's a chance that mine has a room. And these rooms give you a random upgrade from one of your skill trees. One run, I got the last drilling efficiency on the skill tree, so I was absolutely fucking up these rocks. That made the run a lot easier, as I was able to just gather things way quicker than I was supposed to be able to. That randomness is annoying, but it's not that big of a deal. But the real problem is the items you can get for the spider. While mining, you may come across these little spheres in the rocks. You have to bring them to the spider, and then you'll get a new item unlocked for the spider. These upgrades consist of turrets that you can build on mine entrances, and things like drones that can follow the spider around to shoot enemies. So these are obviously massive because they just help you kill enemies. But most importantly, other weapons. This is a huge problem for the game because it never fucking gives them to you. I've played almost hour-long runs where I've only gotten 2 of them. The most I've ever gotten was 3, maybe 4, and that was only in like 1 or 2 runs out of the about 6 hours of the game I've played. This is a massive issue because these items are what determines if you'll be able to succeed and beat the run or not. The base gun you have is pretty much dog shit. It's not bad early on, and it's helpful in the boss fights because the boss fights are full screen and many weapons can't actually reach that far, so they're helpful there. But when it comes to dealing with normal waves of enemies past the 20, maybe even 15 minute mark, it's just awful. The game ramps up in enemy density very quickly and out of nowhere. And only being able to shoot one of them at a time is almost as bad as not even shooting at all. This means if you get past the 20-minute mark, which indicates the first boss, as the bosses tick down in 20-minute intervals, without a second weapon, you just kind of lose the run. Sure, you can still beat the first boss, and you might make it another 5 or so minutes, depending on how lenient the waves are and how many healing resources you've gathered. But there's 0 chance of beating the second boss. For example, I've only made it to the second boss fight once. In that run, I found the bomb thrower, pretty much just a grenade launcher. And since I had this weapon, I was able to not only get to the second boss fight, I was able to beat it and make my way to the edge of the wall. All because I got lucky enough to find the bomb thrower. I mean, look at this boss fight and tell me that I would have been able to beat this without it. The real problem is it just throws so many enemies at you, and the normal gun just cannot deal with them. So if you don't get lucky enough to get the bomb thrower, or maybe like the shotgun or whatever, you have 0 way of dealing with these enemies. When you're shooting one at a time, you have potential like 6 enemies on a wall hitting you at once, a cluster of like 6 or 7 flying enemies shooting at you. If you can't AoE them down, you're just defenseless, and you're just going to get pelted with bullets. So the fact that they're so hard to get just makes the game so hard to play. And like I said before, it sucks because the game is so close to being good. If this wasn't an issue, the game would be so much more enjoyable. Now, if there's ever a patch where they, double or maybe like triple potentially the amount of items you get, then I could recommend it a lot more readily. But as it stands right now, I mean, it is a $5 game, and I did get, and I'm sure I'll still play it a little bit. I've gotten a good amount of enjoyment out of the game for what it is. So it's not like a waste of money per se. Buy $5, spend maybe 10 hours or so playing it. You'll get enough enjoyment out of it. But I can't really fully recommend it though in its current state. I mean, like I said, if there's just a little patch to upgrade the amount of items that drop, I will recommend it immediately. But right now it's fun, but I don't know. It's just a rough recommend. Like I said, I do enjoy it. I just wish they'd fixed the items. So hopefully they will. Hopefully they'll hear the feedback of the community if other people are complaining about it. But for now, yeah, it's a fun game. I'm having fun with it. I can't really guarantee I'm playing for that much longer though.